November 7th, 1942. Midnight at Yard Number 2, Kaiser Richmond Shipyard, San Francisco Bay. The fog rolls thick off the water, carrying the smell of salt, hot steel, and burning welding rods. Floodlights blaze down on an empty ways, a long steel ramp sloping into the bay, still scarred from the last launch. Hundreds of workers stand in silent clusters, cigarettes glowing like fireflies in the dark. They've been called out of their bunks, off swing shift, away from dinner tables. No one knows why yet. Henry J. Kaiser himself strides onto the platform above the ways, megaphone in hand. The shipbuilding titan, broad-shouldered, tie loose, eyes burning with that familiar restless fire, leans over the rail. "Men," his voice booms across the yard, "we're going to build a Liberty ship from keel to launch in 4 days. Not 4 months, 4 days." A ripple of disbelief moves through the crowd. Laughter, nervous at first, then louder. 4 days? The current record is 10 days for the SS Joseph N. Teal, and that was considered impossible. The average Liberty ship still takes 230 days from contract to delivery. Kaiser doesn't smile. He points to the empty ways. "That ship will be named after Captain Robert E. Peary, the man who reached the North Pole first, and we're going to prove America can reach any goal first, if we work together." You can almost taste the skepticism in the air, mixed with the metallic tang of the bay. These are welders, burners, fitters, riveters, many of them women fresh from housework, black workers from the South, teenagers lying about their age. They've already turned shipbuilding upside down with prefabrication and welding instead of riveting. But 4 days? Kaiser turns to his yard superintendent, Clay Bedford. "Clay, pick your best foreman." Bedford doesn't hesitate. "Robert G. LeTourneau," he calls out. A stocky man in a battered hard hat steps forward from the welding gangs. LeTourneau, Scottish immigrant, quiet, methodical, hands like hams scarred from years of torch work. He's the one who figured out how to weld hull plates in half the time by changing electrode angles. He's the one crews follow without question. Kaiser looks him dead in the eye. "Bob, you've got 4 days and 15 hours. Every man, every torch, every crane in this yard is yours. Make it happen." LeTourneau nods once. No speeches. He just turns to his crews and says, in that soft Scottish burr, "Let's get to work then." At 12:15 a.m. on November 8th, the first prefabricated sections, already built in distant yards and trucked in, are swung into place. The keel plates hit the blocks with a clang that echoes across the water. No one in the yard that night realizes they're about to do something that will shake the Axis to its core. But across the Pacific, U-boat captains are already counting the days until America runs out of ships. They're about to be proven very, very wrong.
November 8, 1942. Dawn breaks over Richmond Yard 2, pale light cutting through the fog like searchlights. The ways are no longer empty. Overnight, Robert G. LeTourneau's crews have laid the keel, 1,500 tons of prefabricated steel plates bolted and welded into a spine 441 feet long. Cranes swing massive sections overhead like clockwork, bottom shell units, transverse bulkheads, double-bottom tanks already fabricated weeks ago in satellite yards and trucked in under blackout. You can hear it before you see it, the roar of hundreds of welding torches, the shriek of pneumatic hammers, the constant thunder of steel plates slamming into place. 3 full shifts rotate without pause. Graveyard hands off to day swing, day to swing, swing back to graveyard. No breaks longer than a coffee swig. Women in bandanas climb scaffolding beside men in coveralls, sparks cascading around them like orange rain. LeTourneau moves through the chaos like a calm eye, clipboard in one hand, bullhorn in the other. He spots a bottleneck at frame 42, welders waiting for fitters to tack the web frames. He doesn't shout, he just walks over, takes the torch from a tired burner, and lays down a perfect bead himself in half the time. The line moves again. Food trucks pull up every 4 hours, sandwiches, coffee, donuts handed out on the fly. No one leaves the ways. Sleep? A catnap on a pile of dunnage boards if you're lucky. By noon on the first day, the flat keel is gone. The hull now rises in recognizable shape, garboard strakes curving up to the bilge, the distinctive blunt bow of a Liberty ship taking form. Photographers from Life magazine swarm the edges, flashbulbs popping, newsreel cameras grind away. The whole country is watching now. Kaiser paces the overhead catwalk, stopwatch in hand. He times every lift, every weld sequence. When a crane operator hesitates, Kaiser's voice cracks like a whip. Swing it, time's bleeding. Out in the bay, tugs wait impatiently. Across the continent, steel mills pour white-hot ingots destined for more liberties. In the Atlantic, U-boats prowl convoy lanes, sending another freighter to the bottom every few days. Everyone in the yard knows the stakes. Each ship launched means more tanks reach North Africa, more planes fly from Guadalcanal, more soldiers eat hot food instead of starving on the Murmansk run. But by the end of day 2, exhaustion is setting in. Welders' hands shake. A fitter drops a plate. It crashes 30 feet, narrowly missing a crew below. LeTourneau calls a 5-minute stand down, the only one of the build. He climbs onto a stack of deck plating so everyone can see him. Listen, he says, voice steady. We're not just building a ship, we're building the end of their war. Every minute we save here is a minute sooner some boy comes home. Silence falls across the yard. Then a welder in the back starts clapping. The applause spreads, turns into a roar. They go back to work harder than before. As night falls on the second day, the hull is fully framed. Deck beams go in. The main deck plating begins. No one has ever seen steel rise this fast. And the clock is merciless. They're halfway through the time allowed, and the engines, boilers, and superstructure still need to be dropped in as single pre-assembled units. One delay, one mistake, and the record slips away.